Most finance professionals are using Claude to prompt or to build workflows, but finance doesn't work or live in one single place. It's spread out across meetings or different data systems and has different market contexts. So right now you have to manually pull that into Claude. However, Claude allows you to integrate some of the best tools in the industry directly into Claude. So instead of manually pulling data from meetings or systems and different reports, you connect those tools to Claude and let it operate across them all in one single place. 5 powerful plugins that you need to 10x your finance work with Claude. And for each one, I'll break down why I want you to use it, how to install it, and how to apply it in a real finance workflow. And remember, if you want the prompts and the data sets from this video, then they're in the free community, which is linked in the description below. Plugin 1 is Jamie, and it handles the meetings layer of your workflow. Now, most of the financial decisions that you make are made in conversations like client calls, or maybe internal reviews or audit meetings, and perhaps even negotiations. And that is where assumptions get clarified and where the real risks come out, but it's also the layer that almost always gets lost. Jamie, though, solves this problem because it's a meeting tool built for professionals who work with confidential data and cannot afford to leak what gets discussed in their calls. Now, it doesn't send a bot into your meeting or route conversations through external systems. It runs directly on your device. It captures audio locally, which fundamentally changes how conversations happen because there's no third-party participant in the room. Now, what makes it different is how it handles your data. It's built with a privacy-first architecture, fully GDPR compliant, hosted in the EU, and your data is never ever used to train external AI models. So everything is encrypted, it's processed securely, and even audio files are deleted after processing. And that's what makes it usable in real finance environments where you're dealing with client data, maybe deal terms, and maybe even internal performance numbers. Now, every meeting gets turned into a structured record with transcript, decisions, topics, and action items. And then once you connect it to Claude, that information becomes something that you can actually work with inside your workflow. So to connect it, I open Claude Cowork, I click Customize, go to Connectors, and select Add Custom Connector. I then paste in the Jamie MCP server URL, click Add, and then complete the login. Then I open a new chat, go to the connectors, and confirm that Jamie is toggled on. Now, the use cases here are genuinely very interesting. And I start with a prompt asking Claude to summarize my recent finance meetings, including key decisions, main topics, and current action items. Now, what comes back covers 4 meetings with their topics and the decisions all laid out very cleanly. Now, Claude also consolidates every action item into one view. It flags that 9 are still assigned, and then it suggests what the next steps will be. I push it further with a second prompt where I ask what financial issues we identified across the meetings and what actions are being taken. Now, this is where the behavior changes because Claude stops summarizing and it starts reasoning. It surfaces 7 core issues, and for each one, it then explains what was identified, and then it lists what actions are being taken. And it even identifies a shift from aggressive growth to disciplined growth by connecting every conversation that we had all together. Then I ask it to build a prioritized action plan with deadlines and ownership. So Claude asks 3 clarifying questions first: format, ownership logic, and a deadline framework. So I pick Excel, ownership by role, and a 4 to 6 week timeline. Claude runs the XLSX skill and hands back a workbook with 3 sheets, an action plan with all 9 tasks split into P1, P2, and P3, an issues map connecting the 7 problems to the actions that solve them, and a legend defining priority levels and ownership. It has basically converted scattered conversations into a prioritized execution file, all in one single session. Now, if you're looking to use Jamie yourself, you can find the link in the description below, along with their 20% discount code for any plan. Now, meeting insights are one half of the picture. The other half is what the actual numbers are doing. And if your financial data is trapped across accounting tools, CRMs, and spreadsheets that you keep manually moving around, then your analysis is always going to be one step behind reality. So the next plugin solves that problem. Plugin 2 is coupler.io, and it keeps the data side of your workflow running live. Finance data has a reliability problem that has nothing to do with the accuracy of any individual number. The problem is freshness. Reports get built from exports that were already out of date by the time you downloaded them. Dashboards show last week's picture. Decisions get made against numbers that looked right when someone copied them into a spreadsheet 3 days ago. And the more tools that your business runs on, the worse that situation gets, because every system holds a piece of the truth and none of them talk to each other without someone doing the work by hand. Now, coupler.io fixes that by becoming the layer that keeps your data flowing between the systems and your analysis environment. Coupler.io is a no-code ETL that connects to hundreds of business applications, pulls the data out, transforms it on the way through, and then loads it into a structured environment that Claude can use directly. So without a layer like this, your finance data is still fragmented, even if every individual piece is clean. Now, to install it, I click the plus icon, I go to connectors, then I select add connector. Then I search for coupler.io, I click connect, and then log in, and then authorize access. Then once connected, I confirm it is toggled on in the chat. I asked Claude to pull my latest Coupler finance data set and analyze it like a CFO. I asked it to give me the biggest cost drivers, any unusual spending patterns, and 3 specific recommendations that are grounded only in the actual data. Now, Claude does not answer right away. It calls Coupler to list the available data flows, picks the one I set up, and fetches the schema, columns, and whether costs are fixed or variable. It maps the whole structure before touching the data, and only then does it pull the full data set. Then it analyzes the whole data and identifies patterns. Now, what comes back is a detailed view of everything, including payroll, costs, and expenses. Then it gives recommendations, and each recommendation is tied to what Claude has just observed. Now, this plugin is only powerful if the records underneath it are structured properly. If your internal tables are messy, or there's inconsistent or disconnected tables, then Claude cannot audit anything reliably, regardless of how the data got in. So that is where the next plugin earns its place. Now, plugin number 3 is Airtable, and it basically helps with structuring financial data. Now, the problem with most finance teams isn't the data, it's the structure. Expenses sit in one spreadsheet, invoices are in another one, customer records are somewhere else entirely, and then the accounting system holds yet another view. So each one is correct in isolation, but none of them connect. So every time you need to answer a real question, what is my actual cost per customer, for example, or which vendors account for most of our spend, or which invoices are sitting unpaid for 60 days, someone has to manually pull from 3, maybe even 4 different places and then line up the data. Now, the answer is always slow and always one manual error away from being completely and utterly wrong. Now, Airtable is what fixes that. It holds your financial data in a structured relational system where transactions connect to categories, categories connect to budgets, vendors connect to payments, customers connect to invoices, and every record sits inside a system of relationships instead of just floating in its own isolated file. Now, once those relationships exist, then Claude can work across them as one connected source instead of a pile of fragments, which is what makes real auditing actually possible. You can ask a question that spans 3 tables and gets an answer that actually reflects how the business is really running. Now, to install it, I click the plus icon, I go to connectors, and I select add connector. And in the directory, I search Airtable and I click connect, and then log in, and then I authorize access. I confirm that it is toggled on, and I tell Claude to use my Airtable data and give me a full financial overview, including revenue, expenses, cash flow, and any risks or inefficiencies. Now, naming Airtable explicitly forces Claude to invoke the connector instead of just answering generically. Now, Claude approaches this the way an analyst would approach a new data set. It lists the available bases and the tables inside the base. It then pulls the record from transactions, expenses, invoices, and customers. And at one point, it tells me that the data set is too large for a single context, and it's going to handle it in batches. What comes back is a full financial picture of the business, of revenue trends, expense structure, cash flow behavior, and the core health metrics underneath all of it. Now, Claude derives the headline on its own, it flags the biggest risks, and it shows where the business is operating in a deficit. Then it does something which I didn't tell it to do specifically. It runs a data quality check, and it surfaces actually that the key fields are missing across the records, and it can't build a proper receivables dashboard from this until the structural gaps are fixed. Now, since Jamie was running in the same session, Claude cross-references the data against what came up in those meetings. I pushed one more prompt asking for cost reductions, cash flow improvements, and specific actions to take immediately. So instead of just agreeing with meeting decisions, Claude challenges them. So where the meeting suggested a moderate marketing cut, Claude reads the data and it recommends a temporary freeze until churn improves. It corrects the plan against the numbers instead of just executing it. It lays out a sequence of what to do today within the week and what needs leadership input. And then it closes with one line. Now, you don't have a small inefficiency problem, you have a structural gap between revenue and cost. And the current strategy is underreacting to it. Plugin 4 is Alpha Vantage, and it brings external market context into your analysis. Now, everything we have covered so far sits inside the business: meetings, live data feeds, internal records. But at some point, those internal numbers stop being enough on their own. A company growing 12% only means something when you know what the industry is doing. So costs climbing only become actionable when you can tell whether it's a company issue or a market-wide issue. Now, finance decisions, they sit in the gap between what is happening inside the business and what's happening outside of the business, which is why the next plugin really matters. Now, Alpha Vantage gives Claude direct access to financial and economic data, to stocks, forex, commodities, company fundamentals, and macro indicators like inflation and interest rates. So connected to Claude, you can pull comparisons, trends, and indicators in natural language in the same session where your internal analysis is already happening. So to do this, I click the plus icon, I go to connectors, I select add connector, and then add custom connector. I paste in the Alpha Vantage MCP server URL with my API key appended. I click add, and then I confirm it's toggled on. Authentication happens through the API key itself. For the use case, I asked Claude to run a SaaS industry market analysis. Start with the macro picture, interest rates and inflation, connect it to SaaS performance using a few representative public companies, and then I finish with a analyst style conclusion. What happens next is worth watching. Claude invokes Alpha Vantage and quickly hits the free tier rate limit. So instead of failing here, it paces its requests and it prioritizes the most important data sets. And when it reaches the daily cap, it then tells me. Then it makes a judgment call. It already has macro rate data. It already has company fundamentals across the peer set and price history on the lead name. So that's enough coverage, and it proceeds with the full deliverable anyway. Now, what comes back is a structured market brief that reads like institutional research. Claude lays out the macro setup, it connects it to the sector's performance, and it makes the analytical move that really matters. A rate cutting environment should have helped SaaS valuations in theory, but the sector has gone through a valuation reset driven by multiple compression while the underlying fundamentals held up. The peer comparison extends the point. Profitable companies have found a valuation floor, while high growth but unprofitable names still command premiums with much higher risk attached. It then concludes that the market has shifted from rewarding growth velocity to rewarding growth efficiency. And for high burn subscription businesses, the only path forward is operating leverage and disciplined spend. So now we have our meetings structured, our live data flowing, our internal records audited, and our external context layered in. But none of it matters yet if it does not land somewhere a leadership team can act on, which is what the final plugin handles. Plugin 5 is Gamma, and it handles the final deliverable. Gamma is an AI presentation layer that takes structure analysis and turns it into a designed, visually coherent deck without you manually having to build any slides. Now, Claude can generate slides on its own, but Gamma converts analysis into designed communication with real hierarchy, with visual contrast and narrative flow. So I click the plus icon, I go to the connectors, I select add connector, search Gamma, click connect, authorize, and toggle it on. If I stay inside the same Claude session where the coupler.io analysis already happened, since all the context is still there, I tell Claude to take everything we analyzed and turn it into a high impact executive presentation using Gamma, structured like a board level briefing with a financial overview, the biggest cost drivers shown visually, the anomalies surfaced as visual insights, and the top recommendation tied to quantified impact. Now, Claude invokes Gamma as a tool. It passes the structured understanding it already has, and then it hands the generation off. What comes back is a polished 10-slide deck that mirrors the analysis directly. The opening slides set the tone. The next slides hit the headline financial picture, visualize cost concentration, turn the anomalies into trend charts with clear labels, and it converts each recommendation into a structured execution plan with savings, timelines, and risk levels attached. The second last slide aggregates everything into a waterfall showing the cost base moving down once the actions are applied. And the final slide lands on decisions needed this week, with explicit approvals tied to savings and timelines. Now, the whole flow inside a single session, from raw financial data to a deck a CFO can walk into a meeting with. So that is the full set. Jamie turns meetings into structured intelligence. Coupler.io keeps your financial data live. Airtable grounds Claude in your internal records. Alpha Vantage pulls in external market context. Gamma closes the loop with a board-ready deck. And each one works on its own, and when you chain them together, they cover the full arc from raw inputs to decision-ready output in a single session. Your role shifts when all this is running. You stop assembling data or writing summaries and building slides. So you spend your time on the part that needs judgment, reading what the system surfaced and deciding what it means for the business. Now, the plugins, they handle the execution, but it's your judgment is what makes the output worth presenting. See you next time.